It's there now, so we'll just start over.
All right. Either way, that was the best intro you have
That was
ever
the best intro I've
done,
ever done. Yeah.
and that's all that matters. But
Oh, cool. Could you hear me the whole time? Because I don't know if I added my own audio to it, so that's hilarious. Yeah, they heard Bishop. That's great. So they got Bishop's half of the world's greatest audio. So we're going to give you the tribute to the world's greatest intro. What we're talking about today may be information that might not be relevant in the next coming years. Who knows? What we do know for certain is that there will be a lot of DMs who will still work out of the player's handbook exclusively. This is why we had chose to only work out of that for this kind of first season of the UniversiD&D. And as we move on, we will begin to incorporate more advanced books and things like that. So here you're going to hear a lot of things that might be fizzling out next few years, such as racial traits, ability scores assigned to certain races just for being that race. You come across, perhaps a Dragonborn. Look one now. They're definitely usually beefier, hardier creatures. So you'll see they have certain buffs to that stat score that we talked about last week. So hopefully you retain your lessons from last time. If not, we will be kind of holding on to the whole series, and then we'll be uploading all of it at once onto the YouTube channel so you can catch up to it. We'll probably do all the episodes except the last one. We will launch those to YouTube the week prior to the last episode, give everybody a whole week to hopefully catch up on these. And we don't plan on making them very long, very elaborate or drawn out. Probably, hopefully keep this to about an hour and a half, 2 hours, maybe even less, depending on what we're talking about. But yeah, let's just dig right into it.
Perfect. So I figure the best way for us to do this is let's go down the list here. We'll give a little bit of the basic information for the race. We'll go over the racial traits as they are in the player handbook or the PHB. And then we'll go over some basic information about the characters, as these are generally what is used for this race. As a general, hey, I'm a first-time player, I want to play this kind of a character. What would be a good choice? Now, again, all choices for all character races and classes are valid as far as I'm concerned, and I'm pretty sure Brandon agrees with me on this, that you can play whatever class and race you want to.
Everything is viable. There is no such thing as a bad matchup. It is people who are narrow-minded and can't see the true potential of a certain matchup. And
unless you want to play unless you want to play a gnomish shot putter, and then you're just not like.
Then you're just not setting yourself up for success. That's all there is to that.
But let's go ahead and let's start off. And I will say that there is one thing that I will argue against in this first race.
Dragonborn? Okay, well, let's get it cracked open here. And we will go straight to the nitty-gritty of all of this, to the traits.
Yep. Well, all right. So my first thing that I have an issue with Dragonborn
is,
and it's not even anything about their trait, but if you go back to the initial page.
You want me to scroll a bit? Where are we going?
No, just hit back real quick to where it shows all the races.
Oh, okay.
There's only one issue that I have with the Dragonborn here.
What is that?
And that's that last line right there where it says Dragonborn look very much like dragons, standing erect in humanoid form, though they lack wings or tail. If you want a Dragonborn with a tail, fucking play a Dragonborn with a tail, goddammit.
Absolutely.
All right. Don't let anybody Dragonborns with tails that matter, all right? That's all I gotta say. I'll fight for them.
You'll fight for them?
All right, but now let's get into Dragonborns.
All right. So, here we have, again, we're talking about some things that probably you'll see less as future editions come out, but right now, I think when they built and wrote this originally, it was fantastic, and it has held tried and true for years. So we have the Dragonborn traits here. Ability score increase. Your strength score increases by 2, as we talked about. Notably, Dragonborns are larger, hardier creatures, so they get that +2 to the strength, and then charisma score increases by 1. That's hailing definitely from the closer to the dragon lineage, to where those creatures just have a sheer force of charisma, whether it be through fear or mysticalness. I would say I was going to say mystical beauty, but I didn't quite line up with what I wanted to put out there.
It's
Maybe
almost a machismo. Like Dragonborns very much have a chutzpah for no other technical term.
yeah,
Whether it be good or bad, there are definitely the two opinions of a Dragonborn. Either they inherit the dragon lineage where they are very much all attitude all the time, um, or they try and overcome the fact that they look like a dragon, and so they try and be very nice and proper characters. And so I think that bonus to charisma really does kind of accentuate the, hey, look, I'm a Dragonborn, and this is what I can be.
yeah, absolutely. For the age here, this is mostly just a kind of guideline for players and DMs to go by when you're building either your NPCs as a DM or as a player. You can kind of ask yourself, okay, they grow quickly, they walk hours after hatching, and attain the size and development of a 10-year-old human by the age of 3, and reach adulthood by 15, but they live to be around 80. So they mature pretty quickly, and then they begin to slow down a bit, and they reach that, about 80 years old is usually when they're seeing the end of their lifespan. So you can really use that to your advantage if you have, let's say, you have a DM and he has, pretty heavy elven campaign, and there were some dragonborns in there as well, and the elvens obviously living much longer, they could recall back to that age, of that maybe you're a dragonborn, your father came to this city. Oh, and then the elf sees you and probably is confused because you look exactly like your father when he was younger, those years spanning. Another guideline.
No, definitely. And this gives you something to play with as well as a player. Think about it. If you were a teenager at the age of 5, having the full strength of you as a teenager with the mental capacity of 5, what kind of trouble could you get into? What kind of bold mental faculties did you have? So it's definitely something to play with as a player as well.
Size for Dragonborn, they're all pretty much a little taller than heavy humans, like we talked about earlier. They stand usually, here it states 6 feet tall, but I would argue you could even have maybe a little shorter throughout certain cultural differences. If you have maybe a Dragonborn race from the north, where usually they're probably smaller but hardier, maybe almost dwarvish because of the cold weather up north. Maybe more mid-range, they grow a little taller. But usually here an average given to us is 6 feet tall and usually about 250 pounds. Again, they are that draconic character. So when you see a dragon, they are large, massive, muscular creatures. You don't really see a whole lot of dragons depicted as just being kind of fat and lazy. They're definitely predators of the land, so they develop that muscle structure rapidly. So
Definitely.
They have that dense fibers to put them up to that weight.
And then they are medium size, which for all new players, medium size is your average character size. That means that you as a character take up a 5-foot square. It's going to be what you're used to as a character. There are some character races that are small or are assigned the small size. When we get to those, we will explain those as well.
Yeah. And when we say that you take up a 5-foot space, we don't mean you actually take up a 5-foot space. It means that for 90% of the things you're going to do as a character, you need roughly a 5-foot operating space. So a lot of people are like, why do I need 5 foot of space in combat? Well, because if you got one guy over there wielding a greatsword, one guy over there dual wielding rapiers, and the guy in front of you is casting a spell, you probably want to give him some space. So even though you're not going to fill a 5-foot cube, but
also,
you need
just
that space.
Think about it. If you're an average size human, that means that you are in the 5-foot range. So if you extend both your arms out, that means that your arm span is at least 5 foot. So if it's any more than that, you're going to be smacking the person next to you in combat.
Yeah.
There's actually somebody posted a video of what it actually looks like if you were to put a 5-foot square and then themselves in it for combat. It's actually really interesting, and you actually get to see, oh yeah, no, there's not enough space. Like 5 feet might be too small.
Speed. This is something we talked about. You'll see this a lot. Really, will come up in combat. We hear about it later. But for now, just take a note of it and be reminded of when it comes to combat. We'll get into that. But your speed for a dragonborn, 30 feet. And that's pretty much like an average to go for just about all medium-sized humanoid creatures, is right about that 30 to 35 feet range. Most of them are going to be at 30 feet.
All right, and then this is something very interesting with Dragonborn is that you do get a draconic ancestry. So when you choose to play a Dragonborn, you get to choose what color Dragonborn you're going to play. Now, along with this, you can either do it one of two ways. You can choose to do it completely for flavor because you like a certain color, or you can do it because you're looking for a certain ability. So we'll go over each color, what their ability is, and then kind of go over what that means. So you do get a breath weapon and then a damage resistance. So
Yep.
if you want to go ahead and go down the dragon colors.
Yeah. So black dragons, they are tied to the damage type of acid. And we're going to read these damage types to you now, and then we will explain how the breath weapon works. So for the black dragon, you can see on screen, it goes with acid. For blue, lightning, brass, fire, bronze, lightning, copper, acid. And those are your metallic. Well, they're kind of mixed up here. So you're going to see some elements probably double up, and that is because there are metallic dragons and just color, correct? Or chromatic. That's right. There's metallic and chromatic, and that's lore we'll get into later on down the road. For now, that's kind of how you're going to explain how there are two different damage types or one damage type for two similar type colors. For copper, again, you see here it doubles up. You have acid. Gold, they have fire. With green, poison, another double up. Red, fire, again. And then silver and white both share the cold damage type. Now, what's interesting with these is off to the side, you see where it says breath weapon. It gives this, probably to some people, interesting description or probably confusing or unknown wording. So we're going to go through that. So for the first, what is that, 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yep.
You have a 5 by 30 foot line. What that breaks down to is that when you use that breath weapon, that means for 5 feet wide and 30 feet straight in front of your character, or whatever direction you decide to aim your breath weapon, in that singular line, anything that's in that line or anything that touches those squares needs to make a dexterity saving throw. And we talked about those last episode, to where, what is a saving throw? Well, in these ones, and 2 more down, but we'll get those in a minute because they go into the cones, their breath type is you have to be able to dodge it. It has the ability to be dodged. For the ones you see that have 15-foot cone, essentially that is much more in keeping with what Hollywood shows you that a dragon's breath looks like. You see a dragon breathe out its breath weapon, usually it kind of spatters out in that cone-like shape. And that's what they're describing here, is that for 15 feet in front of you, and at the end of that 15 feet, it is also 15 feet wide. It makes that cone shape. And anything in that space is affected by the breath weapon. And you can see that the saving throw for some of these changes to Constitution, or Con. That means that it's too wide to dodge, so you simply have to have the fortitude to resist it.
Exactly. And so those ones are going to be your poison and your cold. Now, if you notice, there is only one poison, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yeah, there's only one poison and 3 fire types for the Dragonborn. So you do get a lot of choice when it comes to your character, when it comes to choosing a Dragonborn. Not only are you choosing this race, but then you're also choosing, okay, what kind of subset am I in within this race already, just from your breath weapon. So going over your breath weapon, though, is that from your draconic ancestry, you do get to use this breath weapon. You are still partially a dragon. So you use your breath weapon, and each creature in the area of the exhalation must make a saving throw. The type of which is determined by your draconic ancestry. Now you will have to note that this says each creature in your area. So party members NPCs, bad
Yep.
guys, that cart that you wanted to save. That's all in there.
Definitely
Now, this is
being aware of what's in your line of fire. Don't always
yeah,
think that they're allies. Oh, they're going to be safe. It's not the case.
yeah, friendly fire is definitely a
Is
thing.
turned on.
Now, you will see another part here that does probably look like a math equation to most people, and that says the DC for this saving throw equals 8 plus your constitution modifier plus your proficiency bonus. So we will be going into that whole formula in a later episode, so that way we can actually break it down as to what it does exactly and what each point means.
Yep.
All right. Next, a creature takes 2d6, which is 2 of the d6 dice damage on a failed save. So if they can't save, if they're not quick enough or dexterous enough, or if they're not hardy enough or they have enough constitution, then they are going to take all of the damage. If they do succeed and they are quick enough or dexterous enough, or they are hardy enough or they have enough constitution, then they will only take half as much damage.
Right.
Uh, as you get stronger, as your character levels up, so does your breath weapon. So you increase this to 3d6 at 6th level, 4 at 11th, and 5 at 16th. That's a lot of damage potentially.
That is, and it's definitely something great to note here is that this is your character's level. This isn't tied to a class at all. This is your character. It doesn't matter if you take 3 different classes or 1 class. This damage grows with you because you are just a Dragonborn.
Yep. Now here is the important part. After you use your breath weapon, you cannot use it again until you complete a short or a long rest.
Yep.
You are Dragonborn, you are still Dragonkin, but it does take a bit for you to use that ability.
Absolutely. Moving on next, we have damage resistance. So you have resistance to the damage type that is associated with your draconic ancestry. And what that means is, we'll go back up to the chart. You see here, if you choose to be a copper dragonborn, that means you have resistance to acid damage. And what that means is, resistance is all damage that is classified as acid is halved for your character directly off the top of that damage.
Or whatever the damage type is that you become resistant to.
So yeah, again, if you choose silver, you're resistant to cold. And that is just because since you have the ability to exhale such breath, you're given natural resistances to it.
Wouldn't help that you would be hurting yourself by using your own abilities.
Yeah, no.
As far as languages, you can speak, read, write Common and Draconic. Now, Draconic is a separate language, and it is thought to be one of the oldest languages that is often used in the study of magic. It sounds harsh to most other creatures, so this would be your very rough languages. When I like to play it, if I have people that speak different languages at a table, I will say generally, and this is just because I am an American, this would mostly be my Russians and German. This would be somebody speaking Russian or German or Tongan or a very rough, grumble, harsh language. A warrior's language.
Yeah.
That's what if I were to say, oh well, they're just speaking Draconic. That's how it would translate to give a better understanding of how it can sound.
This is where we kind of beginning to get into a little bit nitty gritty on these characters. We're not really going to touch too hardcore on all of these because this information is available to you for free just on the internet. You can go out there and Google these things and find them. Here we just want to make you aware of them and where to find them. And for D&D, Google is your best friend. Just go to that search bar and punch in Dragonborn 5e, which stands for 5th edition, and it will pull up everything you need to know about that. So if you really just want to go all in and start reading on that, you're more than welcome to. Here, for our purposes of this class, we're just going to be touching on a lot of the kind of general things, just enough to get you comfortable and moving on with making a character. So we will move on to the creating your character part. Actually, is this getting into?
Yeah, no, this is getting into the other
That's
books.
getting into the other books. Okay, so
Yeah,
that's where we're
there's
going to
no
cut
way
it off there for
to
the
filter that out.
Dragonborn. Yeah, so we're
Yep.
out of there.
All
So yeah.
right, next we get to talk about one of your favorite races.
Oh yeah.
No, I have no idea. I was just gonna say that. But no, do you have any final thoughts on the Dragonborn before we do skip on to the next race?
For Dragonborn, I would say I do always enjoy seeing a good Dragonborn at the table. They just bring a lot of uniqueness to it. Like I always love seeing a table that has at least one of the kind of unique characters, whether that be Tabaxi, Dragonborn, or even Satyr. I know that's not in the handbook, but I'd say
Since we don't use the M word anymore, as far as what they're technically called.
Yeah.
All right, so we also said that we were going to stipulate races and classes that you would normally see as a quick guide of, hey, look, this race is generally good for this class.
Yeah, okay. Let me skip back to Dragonborn so we can look over there that basic of stats. So right there on screen, strength score increases by 2, charisma score increases by 1. So with that, already you're getting a quick buff to your strength score. So you really want to look at your strength-based classes, and that's going to be your fighter, your barbarian, your paladin, and potentially your cleric. Yep. So I would say that'd be the top 4 I would use for a Dragonborn. And it's always great to go with a fantastic, tried and true Cleric of Bahamut Dragonborn. That is just... People say it's plain. I think it's perfect just because it's... You know what you're about. You're here to take care of evil without question. You're a large, beefy Dragonborn with a big FU hammer.
And you get platinum armor?
Yeah. I mean, come on. What about you, Bishop?
I'm definitely a fan of the Dragonborn that wields a big weapon. I do like the cleric idea, but I harken back, and I will always say that the Dragonborn paladin has a special place in my heart. Just the Dragonborn with a big weapon on his shoulder, going into war, riding on his mighty steed is just always something special.
Yeah, that's very true. Dragonborn paladin is a fantastic choice. All right, moving on to probably something a little more familiar, known through Hollywood's efforts, and that is the dwarf. We're just going to skip right to the traits.
Do it.
So for the dwarf, you notice on the Dragonborn, they got 3 free points for free. But they didn't have some other things that you're going to see here in the dwarf. So off the cuff right here, you can see your constitution score increases by 2. Dwarves are hardy creatures. They're known for being hardy, especially as they're depicted in lore and stories. They're the drinkers. They're the warriors, the fighters. They go to war hard and they party hard. All of you know them.
For sure. And then you have the age of a dwarf. So dwarves mature at the same rate as humans, but are considered young until they are of 50 years old. On average, they live to about 350 years, though. So,
can you imagine thinking you're considered young until you're 50?
Dude, I hope so. I hope I'm considered young until I'm 50. You know what I'm saying?
That's like a dream now.
For real. So don't be afraid to play an older dwarf. Don't be afraid to throw a 1 in front of that age and just be like, afraid, hey, look, I've been here.
He's been around.
They have been around. Your size, you want to go over that for us?
Yeah, size usually you're about 4 to 5 feet tall, and again, these are all just guidelines. Really, you can go outside of these numbers. They're not set in stone. There's no one that's above in the clouds of D&D that's like you can only be a 4 or 5 foot tall dwarf. No, these are just suggestions to all of you. Just like with the human races we see here in the real world, we have people who are 4'11" or 4'1" and reach all the way up to 7'6", 7'8". Don't be afraid to play outside of this if you want to. Obviously, dwarves, you're probably not going to be over like 5.5 feet. You're not going to see a 6 foot tall dwarf. So
I can't be a 7.5 foot tall dwarf.
No.
Is that what you...
Essentially, no, you cannot. But your size is still medium for a dwarf, even though you are a bit shorter, even though you are smaller than, say, the dragonborn we just saw. You're still both that medium-sized creature, just because a dwarf is definitely, the term barrel-chested was made for a reason. For your speed, you see a decrease here. It goes down to 25 feet, but your speed is not reduced by wearing heavy armor. And I think that was definitely a much older text. I don't believe in any games I've really played where heavy armor reduced your speed.
It used to.
It used to.
It used to. There definitely needs to be a revision for that.
Yeah.
I could definitely see them revising that to where heavy armor doesn't give you a disadvantage
on stealth.
or stealth.
I could see that.
I could definitely see that. So next we have dark vision, which is an amazing ability. You will hear it come up for a lot of races, and some races that you would think should have it will not have it.
Yeah.
Case in point, the Dragonborn. Most dragons have dark vision, so it's weird that Dragonborns don't get it.
I think that's probably just to justify it. They probably removed the dark vision to give them the +1 to charisma, to give them that majestic touch.
Definitely so. But your dark vision, you are accustomed to life underground. You have superior vision in the dark and dim conditions. So here's where it's very important to understand this. You can see in dim light within 60 feet of you as if it were bright light, and in darkness as if it were dim light. You can't discern color in darkness, only shades of gray.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, as long as there's some light, you're still good. Once it gets to that 60-foot point, though, that's when everything just becomes shadow pictures. That's when you're at midnight outside and you can kind of see where the trees are and where that house is across the street. You can see the outline of it. That's where you get to that kind of vision.
I definitely think a good way to put that is think of like the first few episodes of the Andy Griffith Show or the Addams Family way back when everything was just black and white. That's kind of how it is. A lot of grayscale here, but definitely darker still. You're not going to be able to discern colors, and you're definitely going to still be at a disadvantage if you're trying to see something in pure darkness with regular dark vision.
For sure, for sure.
Moving on, we go on to the Dwarven Resilience. You have advantage on saving throws against poison, and you have resistance against poison damage. So as we talked about with the Dragonborn, if you choose a certain sub-race of that, you have resistance to a certain element. Here is a dwarf, just across the board, you have resistance to poison, and anytime someone tries to use poison damage against you and it forces a saving throw, you have advantage on that saving throw.
Yep. All right. Next, we have our Dwarven combat training, and this is kind of interesting. So you have proficiency with the battle axe, hand axe, light hammer, and warhammer. So automatically out of the gate, your character will automatically be proficient with certain weapons. Now, this can come in handy later on in your game if a piece of equipment shows up or your DM starts handing out treasure and you see a piece of equipment. Sometimes you may receive a piece of equipment that you can't use proficiently because your character wouldn't know how to use it.
Absolutely, that has happened to where just sometimes a DM will roll on a loot table, and instead of getting that longsword you're hoping for, suddenly you have let me think here. We'll be outside of that range.
Get a staff.
Staff. If you're not trained in it, there you go. So next we have tool proficiency. Another thing I think that's really neat is just picking up this race. You have proficiency with one of the artisan tools of your choice. You can choose smith's tools, brewer supplies, or mason's tools. These are things you won't really pick up or be too useful in combat. Sometimes they can, but particularly this is for what's known as downtime events, or perhaps if your character is trying to negotiate with somebody. Let's say you are a dwarf and you're traveling through a town, maybe where dwarves aren't as common, and you need to strike a deal with a particular noble or something like that. Well, you can tell them that, okay, I'll forge you a sword. How about that? So you can go back to a blacksmith you may have seen in the city and be like, hey, I need to use your forge. I need to forge a sword, and I'll let you help me and put your engravings on it. You have that proficiency with smith tools. You've helped the blacksmith out, you've helped your party out, and now you've gained the favor of that noble.
Yep, it's definitely a great tool for RP.
You want to get those last two for us, Bishop?
Yep. So we got stone cutting. Whenever you make an intelligence check for history, now this is very important. It's only for history related to the origin of stonework. You are considered proficient in the history skill and add double your proficiency bonus to check instead of your normal. So this is just harkening back to the dwarves living underground, living in rock, understanding rock to its fullest. Which, you know what? A lot of dungeons, you can find out a lot about a dungeon from being able to study the rocks. Do not underestimate a dwarf's natural ability to find traps because they can follow how the stone is cut.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we have their languages. You can read, speak, and write Common and Dwarvish. Dwarvish is full of hard consonants and guttural sounds. These characters spill over whatever other language a dwarf might speak. So you're going to be speaking a lot of half language. Again, this is a lot of the harsher languages as we would consider in the world that just sound harsher. But again, this would be a half language. So anytime your character would be speaking Common, you would throw in a harsh language word, not a harsh or a foul language
not a
word.
Foul language, but like just a deeper emphasis on certain parts of that word.
Yep. Or it could be a harsh or foul language word.
Yeah, it could be. You're a dwarf. Who knows? Go at it. But especially if you're walking through a town and you, I don't know, get some moldy bread, and you're gonna probably be swearing about that and enunciate a little harder than what you meant to, and maybe someone hears you.
For sure. Now, there are some subclasses of dwarf. We're not going to go over those here because it will get into other subclasses of dwarf that are not in the player handbook, and we don't want to confuse anybody. So, when you do choose any of your races, each of them will have a sub race. Like the Dragonborn, you get to choose your color. Or the other races, they have different regional races, for lack of a better term. So let's go ahead and back out of our dwarven
thoughts on the dwarf race.
I say that female dwarves don't have to have a beard. I know some people are lifelong female dwarves have beards. I say you don't have to, but I do say that male dwarfs do braid their underarm hair. Other than that, they're a fun race. You want to play a boisterous character, just a character that's larger than life. A dwarf is definitely not a bad option. They are headstrong generally. Now, this is the general perception for a dwarf. They're headstrong and bold. These are characters that are ready to fight. So if you're looking for that kind of a character, definitely look at the dwarf.
Definitely
what about you?
Boisterous and proud. Whether it be, and what I think is great about playing a dwarf is that you get to be excited about pretty much whatever you choose where your dwarf came from. If they're all about, obviously most dwarves are just about combat, but let's say you come from a place to where your dwarven heritage in your town is about how well you can cut stone from where you're from. And you're just as proud about how well you do with combat as you do your mason tools. You are probably to the point of arrogantly good at what you do, and you let people know. And that's what I think is really great about dwarves. They're not afraid to definitely show out.
They are not afraid
They're not
to do
afraid to
that.
show out, especially when it comes to. It doesn't really matter if you are. I think what's great about dwarves is that it doesn't matter if they're super poor and they're just literally stonemasons, or if they're the ultra wealthy. There's always that same exact level of boisterous pride. Now, for the stonecutter, it may be how well they can cut these gems and stones and things like that. For the wealthy and the noble, maybe it's how well braided and jewel encrusted his beard is, or how great it looks, something like that. Definitely quick signs of wealth for a dwarf is how well their beard is and what's in it. And I have to sneeze.
Thank God it's not just me.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
All right, let's go on.
All
to
right. Well,
our next
what
one.
classes would you for quick pairings?
For quick pairings? Oh gosh. I definitely think a dwarf would lie well in the fighter and the cleric, just because of the not just combat prowess, but the additional proficiencies those classes can gain. So you can really kind of place yourself properly as a dwarf to where, okay, as a fighter, yeah, you're great in combat, but you can also take this proficiency to where you're also great off the field.
Okay. For me, I would say the dwarf solidly falls in 3 places. That is going to be your barbarian, just because every dwarf is going to rage over his spilt beer. Second is the cleric. I find dwarves being that hardy, just mountain-dwelling folk that they really thematically fall into that cleric position really well. And having that extra constitution allows them to stay up a bit longer.
Yeah.
And then the third one is monk. I think that because they do live in the rock and they spend so much time in earth, and having that natural just connection to it allows them to study and understand and evolve themselves more into being. And I just think monk fits in very well with that. And I think the class offsets the race very well.
Yeah, I'd say that complements it well, especially with the certain proficiencies you can get from the monk.
For sure.
All right, moving on to probably one of the most popular races there is for the fantasy realm. And that is the elf.
The long years.
The long ears.
All right. So for your elf, you get an ability score increase of dexterity. You get that increased by 2. So elves are very dexterous. They're graceful. They are able to move with quick and sure footing. So that is where they're getting this extra dexterity.
Definitely, you've always see elves depicted as being light-footed or quick to the hand. So the overall score here is dexterity. For the age, as everyone knows, they live much longer than probably any other race there is as far as playable character races that I'm aware of.
They are one of the oldest living.
Yeah. So elves reach physical maturity at about the same age as humans. The elven understanding of adulthood goes beyond physical growth to encompass worldly experience. An elf typically claims adulthood and an adult name around the age of 100 and can live to be up to 750 years old. So that's interesting. It gives you that here in the age as to where somewhere around that 100-year experience of the world, you actually take on either probably a shift to your name, maybe even a moniker to your name, to where you now pronounce yourself as an adult. Almost kind of like let me think here. One, like if you were younger, if your name was Matthew and you were younger, you probably went by like Matt. Hey, I'm Matt. And then as you got older and maybe became a little more experienced in business in the world, you moved into calling yourself Matthew. Or, hey, my name's John when you were younger. Then you moved on to Jonathan as you became older.
Yeah. This could also explain why elves always have apostrophes in there.
Always have apostrophe, crazy long names, because they just decided that every year they're going to add a new letter.
Which, that would be a really interesting... I would love to see that event take place in-game. Where the elf
like a naming ceremony, or like a coming of age.
Yeah, where the elf finally decides, you know what? I've hit my 100th year. I do feel as though I've gained the time. I'm going to take on my adult name. That would be a cool, interesting character session to see.
I think it'd be neat to have to come up with that, to kind of realize, okay, I'm nearing my 100 years. Maybe I'm already there. Maybe I'm at like 105, and I didn't really feel it until recently. And I'm going to take on a quest. And when I finish this, I'm going to be known as this. Or maybe along the path of this quest, I'll find my name.
That's interesting. I would love to do that. Even as a DM, to use that as an idea of, okay, you guys, I would almost do it first session, or like that after that first encounter, have the elf be like, look, you've done it. You've reached the age where you can now attain adulthood. You may be 285 years old, but you've finally done a quest.
You finally did it.
You can finally get out of here.
You can finally get out of your parents' bedroom.
Yeah, you can get out of their tree, find your own tree.
Find your own tree.
Because everybody knows that elves live in trees. So.
No, they don't.
Actually, wasn't there a line about that, about elves still living in trees or something?
Don't know what you're talking about.
No, that's...
So moving on to size.
I'll look for it and find it later.
We're moving on to size. Elves range from under 5 feet to over 6 feet. And you have more of like a tall, slender build. Again, your size is medium. So, again, it's really, I would say, if you think about it in human terms, the dwarf is kind of like that shorter, stockier guy who runs hard football. Definitely, he's out there to tackle people. And then your elves are like your swimmers. They have that very lithe, athletic body. They aren't really looking to put on a ton of muscle. They're looking to be slippery and graceful. For speed, your base walking speed is 30 feet for the common elf. There are some sub races we will not go over that increase this, but for now, walking speed is 30. Like we saw with the dwarves, you have dark vision, so you're accustomed to the forest and the night sky where it can be a bit darker because of these scenarios. You have superior vision in dark and dim conditions. You can see in dim light within 60 feet of you as if it were bright light, and then in darkness as if it were dim light. Again, you cannot discern color in darkness, only shades of gray. So a lot of people always like to be, I picked a race with dark vision. That's fantastic. You still failed the puzzle. What? Why? And then you light a torch and realize there was 3 color stones on this door, and that's why you failed it.
Yep. You want to go ahead and finish up the elf for us?
Yeah. So here, again, we saw certain proficiencies handed to the dwarves for lacking that extra +1 in a different stat block. So for here, they have keen senses. You have proficiency in the perception skill. So you're given a free skill just for picking elf.
For your elvish eyes.
For your elvish eyes. What do you see with your elvish eyes? I don't know. I rolled a 1.
Oof.
Big oof. Probably the most... Excuse me, not yet. The Fey Ancestry. You have advantage on saving throws against being charmed, and magic cannot put you to sleep. So being as they are notably descended from the Feywild, elves have this extra kind of mental defense against being charmed. Along with magic cannot put you to sleep. You cannot be willed to sleep through arcane methods. And that is because we have the trance ability, which is probably the most notable ability of the elves when it comes to D&D, and the most useful ability that people claim for this race. And that is, elves do not need to sleep. Instead, they meditate deeply, remaining semi-conscious for 4 hours a day. While meditating, you can dream after a fashion. Such dreams are actually mental exercises that have become reflexive through years of practice. After resting in this way, you gain the same benefit that a human does from 8 hours of sleep. Now, this has been tailored a bit as the game has evolved. A little more kind of an unwritten rule here is that although you can sleep in a 4-hour manner, in order to gain a benefit of a rest, you still must only do 4 more hours of a light activity. But this can include taking a watch, reading a book, or doing small labor, things that don't really exert you, but you could probably whittle or do some light crafting as long as it didn't exert your character too much. And then for languages, you can read, speak, and write Common and Elvish. Elvish is a fluid with subtle intonations and intricate grammar. Elven literature is rich and varied, and their songs and poems are famous among other races. Many bards learn their language so they can add Elvish ballads to their repertoire. Definitely a very flowy, gentle language. I'd say if I had to compare this to something, it would probably be a little more of the probably French persuasion. Something that just, as you speak, they almost halfway sing it. It's very smooth language. It doesn't have a lot of harsh tones that we've had in the other two. It definitely comes out probably a little more feminine.
A little more ethereal.
A little more ethereal. All right. What's your thoughts on quick class matchups for the elf?
The elf, you can always go tried and true and follow Legolas and go with the ranger.
Very true.
The dexterity is great for that. You can always go fighter as well. When I think of an elf fighter, I always immediately go crouching tiger, hidden dragon. Like just that style of
Yeah.
finesse and very fluid. Or druids. Elves are so tied to the land that they really fit in with that druid theme. So that's me. I never have a problem with seeing a druid elvish or an elvish druid.
I would say, given their bonuses to a lot of these things here, a great fit for an elf is probably a rogue. Simply because you can take that quick 4-hour trance to revitalize yourself, and then simply walking around and looking at things isn't really exerting hard on your body, so you can just keep doing that. Especially with, it just gives you perception skill. That's fantastic. You can spot those traps quicker.
All right. Let's go on to the gnome.
To the gnome in our next 3.
Can't wait to talk about this one.
Yeah?
Yeah. I love gnomes. Gnomes are amazing creatures.
Get it pulled up on screen here. It's all you. Go, bud.
All right. So the gnome has an ability score increase of intelligence. These guys are 2 points smarter than anybody else. So already you know that these guys have a high intelligence wavelength. These are your high thinkers. These are your knowledgeable scholars. But they only got 2 points in intelligence, which means they generally know how to think very well. That mouth just may not be as smart. So your gnomes are known to say something that they shouldn't, or to undertalk or to overtalk other people in just using large words and larger vocabulary. Now your gnomes do mature at the same rate as humans do. Most are expected to settle down into adult life around the age of 40, and they can live to about 350 to 500 years. So yeah, so can you imagine having to have your entire family set up at 40 and living to 500?
Oh gosh, it's no wonder why gnomes are so far traveled because they want to get away from their family.
Uh, yeah. For that though, your gnomes are between 3 and 4 foot generally. Now, if you want to play a 14-foot gnome, you're more than welcome to.
No, you're not.
Um, but if you want to play a smaller gnome, you're more than welcome to as well. On average, they are about 40 pounds, so you're looking at about a small child, and your size is considered small. Now, for your speed, you are only going to be moving 25 feet. That is because you are a small creature. You got to kick those
Got
legs.
the legs.
You do get dark vision again, allows you to see in dim and dark conditions. You can see in dim light up to 60 feet as if it were bright light, and then in darkness as if it were dim light. You do have gnome cunning. Now, this is fun. You have advantage on all intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws against magic. So, what that means is that you are because you're a gnome and you work with such high intelligences that you have a natural cunning ability to protect your mind against such magics. Now you do know different languages. You can speak, read, and write Common and Gnomish. Now, Gnomish is a language which uses the Dwarvish script and is renowned for its technical treaties and its catalogs and knowledge of the natural world. Now, Gnomish, when I think of it being spoken, this is more. I almost want to say Canadian, like Canadian French. That's how I think of Gnomish. It's just a very like sweet and pip kind of a language when it's spoken.
Yeah.
So I love that. But that's the way that I interpret Gnomish for the most part. Uh, Gnomes, man, I really can't say enough about them. There are sub races for the gnomes. We will not be talking about them as well. But the gnome is a very, very cool class. Yes, you do have that setback where you're not able to move as fast as everybody else because you do lose that 5 feet of movement. But the gnome allows for a very loud character. Um, I always like to say gnomes are definitely the squeaky wheel that needs oil. And they're a very fun and cunning class to play. You have any thoughts on gnomes, good sir?
I would say with that, everything they make fantastic casters of any kind. You don't need to stick to only an intelligence-based caster because you do have the advantage on saving throws for intelligence, wisdom, and charisma against magic. So that's huge for a caster. Because if they see you're a caster, they're going to try and lock you down. And most lockdown spells are in those three categories. So you could easily make yourself, you could go the wisdom course of the wizard, or you could even go on to a wisdom-based caster.
Yep.
I would say
any other casters.
For me, when I think of a gnome, I do think of either kind of the extremes, really. Either you're that sneaky little rogue that likes to steal stuff because you can get into small places easier, or you are that extremely powerful and well-renowned wizard. You're that archmage. You're that, up to 500 years old. That's a lot of time to study magic. You're that, 375, 400-year-old archmage who's been in charge of the school for as long as any human can remember.
Yeah. For me, when I think gnomes, I'm kind of on the same wavelength as you. I go extremes. So for me, the gnome has two big roles. One is the bard. Um, I know they are not an intelligence-based caster, but a gnomish bard is always just in my head, plucking away, jumping on tables and using chandeliers to swing, and They are always that. Uh, the other is the gnomish barbarian.
Really?
Yeah, there's just something about the idea of you've had little man syndrome your entire life.
I have
You're
played at a table that
500
had a
years
gnome
old,
barbarian. It wasn't D&D, it was Pathfinder, but it was hilarious.
and you're just so full, and just you have that, and then the gnome battle master fighter. And when we get into the classes, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
But the gnome that's lived that 500 years and is just commanding from his table,
Okay, I can
just
see
moving
that. I
his
can see
chess
that.
pieces.
Okay, okay. That wraps up our gnome.
That is our gnome.
Next, we
All
come
right.
to the half
Other
elf,
the other biggest
the
class
other
ever
biggest
played,
class ever played in D&D.
or the other race, not class. Sorry.
Race, yeah.
All right, you want to take over the half elf, good sir?
Yeah, I got it. So for the half elf here, they definitely get to see a lot of both sides of the world. They get to see a lot of traits given to them from their elven side and a lot of traits given from their human side. And when we get into the humans, you'll see where that comes from and what I'm talking about here. Right off the bat, they get 3 ability score points, 2 of them into charisma, and then 4. You get 4 ability points. Your charisma score increases by 2, and then 2 other ability scores of your choice increase by 1. So you can put those points wherever you want to see fit, but you can only put them in 1 more. So you get your charisma by 2, and let's say you want to make a caster. So you put 1 in dexterity, so you can be a little more nimble, and 1 in the con, so you can be a little hardier. And that is just an example of a way to go about it. Or if you want to make maybe a fighter, you want to be strong and dexterous. 1 point in strength, 1 point in dexterity. For your age, half elves mature at the same rate as humans do and reach adulthood around the age of 20. They live much longer than humans, however, and they often exceed about 180 years. So again, you've already seen quite a huge cutoff from being full-blooded elf. Moving down to 180 years is the usual top span for a half-elf. For your size, you're going to be ranged from about 5 to 6 feet tall, and you are medium. Your walking speed is 30 feet, and you do gain dark vision. You have the Fey Ancestry skill here, to where you have advantage on saving throws against being charmed, and magic cannot put you to sleep. However, as you see here, you do not see the ability to trance. Losing that full-bloodedness of the elf has separated you from the Feywild enough to where you cannot connect to that magic to restore yourself via meditation. But you do pick up skill versatility. You gain proficiency in 2 skills of your choice. You get to choose them. That's wow. That is incredible. I mean, it really is. It's amazing.
There really is a reason why it's a very popular race.
They get a lot of love. And then for languages, you can speak, read, and write Common, Elvish, and again, 1 extra language of your choice. There's really almost no downside to playing a half-elf, unless you're in a certain campaign where they're just looked down upon. And that can happen. There can be parts of the world in your DM's world to where being a half-breed, you're looked down upon. From both sides. But quick and easy, it's a lot to go with the half-elf, but that's them. Typically, they can fit anywhere. They really are. And when we get to humans, you'll see this. They're definitely a jack-of-all-trades kind of race. They can fit in any class well. Now, any race we go over is going to fit in a class. They may not be a great fit, but they can fit anywhere.
For sure. And there are some, and that's why we said these are just classes that we would suggest or classes that we really like to see. Using the gnome as an example, a gnome generally is not going to play a barbarian, but it is something that we like thematically or that we think is very interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, move on to the
That's the half elf.
halfling.
Well, what would you throw a half elf in as a class?
A half elf as a class. Let me get back to them. Pull everything back up for our stream. Half elf for a class. Honestly, if you pick half elf, to me, you got a little bit of a vanilla mindset. You're probably one of maybe 3 core classes. You're probably a fighter, say fighter, ranger, or druid.
There you go. And that's not a bad idea, you know. If you're looking for something to be able to tease your way in, make sure
Absolutely.
that your
Don't
stats
don't
are
let
going to be
my
there.
tone mislead you. I was just being a bit of a dick. You want to keep this game super fun and still be viable to the table and feel accomplished as a player. Throw together a half elf and make him a fighter. Make him a champion fighter. And we'll talk about that, but the champion fighter is definitely memed upon a lot as being the most basic of easiest classes to play. And I still love playing a champion fighter. It is amazing because you can, the things you can do is great.
Oh yeah, no. Champions are not a bad fighter. For me though, I go the other way with a half elf. The half elf, if I'm going to go fighter with the half elf, I think I'm going to go something that just uses that's just I could see trying to think like I could see them as a fighter for sure. I don't think champion is the way I would go though. But I'm also looking at my clerics very heavily for my half elves. They just seem to really be able to carry a cleric very well. The other one that I'm gonna go with is the rogue. For me, the half elvish rogue gets to really play on. You can put your points where you need to make sure that all of your stealthing and everything is brought up to par. But then you also have that charisma where you can almost try and talk your way out and be that kind of
True.
rogue. You can be the
Yeah.
devilish rogue. So half elf really fits that.
Yeah.
All right, but that is our half elf.
Moving on to halfling.
Woohoo! If you're not big, you're not big, and if you laugh, you half. Guess what? You're a halfling. So your halflings, their ability score increases to dexterity. They are quick little jump arounders. They are able to move. They are free spirited. Their age, they reach adulthood at 20 and generally live to the middle of their second century. So yeah, you get to be about 200 years old.
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, 2,000 years old. I just said fucking right.
Centuries
100. Century's 100.
Oh my god.
Not bad. I was about to have. I'm still sick. All right. I'm claiming the sickness to that.
Told you to take Dayquil.
Oh man, I took something, Quill. So your halfling's average height is about 3 foot tall, and you weigh about 40 pounds. So what's weird is that a halfling can be shorter than a gnome. Do not get the two confused. They will beat you up. You are still small. You do still have that walking speed of 25 feet. Now here goes where the halfling gets one of the most interesting abilities that has ever been made naturally, and that is lucky. When you roll a 1 on a d20 for an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw, you can re-roll the die, and you must use the new roll. So, this is huge. This is just, you get that real bad roll, you get to go, let me try again.
Hang on, what's a bad roll?
Oh yeah, some of us have those. Some of us don't have to play halflings. The other ability that you get is brave. You have advantage on saving throws against being frightened, which is very interesting. You got the bravery of the small over here. You do get halfling nimbleness, which you can move through the space of any creature that is a size larger than yours, which is awesome. That means that if your party is blocking up a hallway, you don't have to worry about them. You can just go right through the hallway.
Yep.
You don't have to worry about any kind of hey, shimmy over, or you're good to go. This also means that you can get behind an enemy. You can just go right through their legs if they're bigger than you.
Yeah.
As far as languages, you can speak, read, and write Common and Halfling. The Halfling language isn't secret, but Halflings are loath to share it with others. They write very little, so they don't have a rich body of literature. Their oral traditions, however, is very strong. Almost all Halflings speak Common and converse with the people whose lands they dwell, or through which they are traveling. I know it may not be the most proper way to say it, but the Gypsy language that they would speak. I forget what it's called. I apologize. I'm not cultured at the moment. But that's how I would interpret Halfling if you needed a real world example to kind of equate it to.
That's interesting
Or
because
Amish.
how I not so much how it sounds, but their culture really to me aligns with, if you've seen that Castlevania on Netflix, The Speakers. They didn't write it. They never wrote anything down. They always just told stories through generations, constantly.
Yeah, that would be another great way of interpreting them as a culture. What do you think? Class race combo? Any last thoughts on it?
I don't have a ton of experience with halflings, so I'm gonna have to base my decision based purely off the information given to me right here. And based off of that, I could see a ranger with like a hand crossbow.
There you go. For me, your halflings are always going to fit really well into three positions. Your halfling is going to play a rogue very well because they're small. They can get in, they can get out. They don't have to worry about other creatures. They have that lucky. Your bard, again, jumping up and down, being able to play around and play music, and they have this brave feature, and so they're boisterous, and there you go, the Romani. Thank you for giving us that information. And then the other that the halfling I feel really fits well into is the wizard. I really like a halfling wizard. There's something about them. Yeah, there's something about them just not fitting in correctly into being a caster. They're one of the only more mystical races, as you would say, that just doesn't fit into that wizard role.
True.
So I really like that idea of a halfling wizard who their magic isn't. They haven't achieved the height of their magic because they were good. They achieved it because they just got lucky.
They were in the right class, right time.
Yeah, they were just in the right class at the right time. At their finals, they cast the spell wrong, but they sneezed, and so it got that last little bit of the vocal and semantic component, and it worked out. I like that idea of that halfling.
Okay.
So. All right.
Come to our last three.
The most important three. No, I'm kidding.
I'll say definitely every one of these races is notable and has its own notoriety, but for me, the half-orc always kind of holds a place just because I love a good half-orc. I really do. It just... I don't care if you go barbarian, fighter, even ranger. I just like them being... I really like seeing half-orcs in a ranger position. I like seeing half-orcs that are just a little less on that aggressive side and more towards, I just want to take care of the land and the clan.
For sure.
So I'm gonna take off on this one.
Go ahead, you take it, because the next one's mine.
Next one's yours? Okay.
Oh, for sure.
So the ability score increase, they see 3 solid points here. Strength for 2 and con by 1. Again, they're a hardier creature. If you know the full-blooded orcs, they are large. They are powerful creatures. So being half of that lineage grants you the 2 in strength and 1 in constitution. For age, this is a very interesting point was brought to me for one of my characters about age, and I'll talk about it when I get done with this. Half orcs mature a little faster than humans, reaching adulthood around age 14. They age noticeably faster and rarely live longer than 75 years. Now the question is, are they not living longer than 75 years because they're dying in combat? Or is that just the capstone of their life ability?
The answer to that is in the question. Does a salmon die if it doesn't swim upstream?
We'll never know.
We'll never know.
We'll never know.
But honestly, in this, we do not know what the life longevity is of a half orc, because it does just say they rarely live longer than 75 years.
Yeah,
we don't get
it was the same wording for an orc, and that's what kind of where it came from. One of my players brought me that, and I was like, I don't know. That's a great question.
Okay. So if you have a 300-year-old orc, you have a or half orc.
Yeah, who knows? Your size. You are somewhat larger and bulkier than humans. You range from 5 to well over 6 feet tall. Still, you're in that medium range. Your base walking speed is still 30. You do have dark vision. And what's really neat here is the menacing. You gain proficiency in the intimidation skill. So for just being the way you are as a half-orc, you are naturally intimidating. And what's great here is these next two things are huge for the half-orc and why I love them so much. Relentless endurance. When you are reduced to 0 hit points but not killed outright, you can drop to 1 hit point instead. You cannot use this feature again until you finish a long rest, which is great in that clutch moment in combat, to where if you're like a frontline fighter, you're that half-orc paladin, fighter, cleric, what have you, your front lines, and you take a heavy blow and your party's like, oh no, he's dead. No. Your character catches himself on their legs and stands back up to keep fighting. It's super useful. And then savage attacks. When you score a critical hit with a melee weapon attack, you can roll one of the weapon's damage dice one additional time and add it to the extra damage of the critical hit. So for this, as we talked about damage dice last episode in weapons, one of the best uses for this would be to use a battle axe or a great axe, because it is a 1d12 damage dice. Huge dice. It's the biggest of the damage dealing dice that there is without being multiples. So if you get a crit and you're using this weapon, instead of rolling 1d12, well, now you're rolling 2. And that's just a huge. That could be the difference between finishing off that boss battle or not finishing off that boss battle. And then for the languages, you can speak, read, and write Common and Orc. Orc is a harsh, grating language with hard consonants. It has no script of its own, but is written in the Dwarvish script.
That's interesting that orcs would use Dwarvish when written.
Well, they're both rather hardy, battle-proud creatures. It's probably where they learned it from.
For sure. All right, so final thoughts on the half-orc and class combinations. You already said your favorite.
Yeah, they just do great as barbarians, just because you can get more of those critical hit dice as you go along.
Yeah.
Having played a half-orc barbarian, it's a lot of fun.
I will say, for me, the half-orc is solidly a cleric every time.
I can easily see that. Absolutely, yeah.
Just that +2 to strength, that +1 to constitution, the fact that they're half orc, half something else. They're trying to find out what gods they need to pray to, and the storyline gives itself, and it's just a fun and interesting RP idea, as well as just a fun and strong class. The fact that you can be like, the power of my god compels you, and you already have the menacing is just even better.
They subscribe to the Swoley Bible.
Yeah, for real. Yeah, no, that's half-orc for me.
Now on to the most vanilla of basic races there is, and the most versatile race there is, the human.
And my personal favorite race. And I get a lot of flack for it. Yes, the human is the basic vanilla race, and there is a reason for it. So to go over the human's traits, you'll see it's a very small box, and there's a reason for it. The humans have an ability score increase to everything. As a human, you just naturally have a more weathered and full knowledge of life. Which doesn't truly make sense, but it covers the fact that as humans we're able to adapt and survive all over the place. That's how we are able to gain an ability score increase to all of the stats. Age, humans reach adulthood in their late teens and live less than a century. For size, humans vary widely in height and build, from barely 5 foot to well over 6. Regardless of your position in that range, you're still medium. You do have a 30-foot speed, and your languages are that you can read and write Common and one other language. Now, humans typically learn languages of people that they deal with, but they're fond of learning other tongues as well. Now, for anybody looking at this, you'll be like, well, humans don't get anything. Like, they
There's no dark
literally have the
vision,
smallest
no
box.
dark vision, no skills, no re-roll a natural one.
Yeah, no extra damage.
What makes a human so great, Bishop?
What makes a human so great is two things. One, because they don't have any specialized skills, you can put them anywhere. And two, because you have that natural bonus to all of your stats, you don't have to worry about falling behind. That's what makes the human so great. And that's just the base human. There are other types of humans, including one that for most people you will never get to play because most DMs ban them before you even get to choose. And that's the variant human, which is extremely overpowered. Everybody knows it. It's a fun
What
subclass
do
to
you
play.
mean, bro?
Every time I get a chance, be human, baby. All day.
Every time. Every time. If I have to play a
Every
human,
time.
I'm playing a variant human.
Variant human. I will say, in Relden, there is a human player who is a pure human, not variant.
Who would that be?
Let you figure it out.
Never heard of this guy.
Never heard of him. Yeah, we have one vanilla human that took all ability scores to their stats. So the human, what do you think? What are your thoughts on the human?
Honestly, I prefer to see the human in.
Does he meme it? That's the question.
Does he meme? I know. Do I meme it?
You can take the meme. You can do it.
I like to see humans placed in roles to where they can show their adaptability. So whether that be through Bard or Rogue, to where you get a lot of expertise potential, that's where I like to see them, in those kinds of classes where you can gain a larger amount of expertise. Or Monk. Because I feel like it's just, obviously any race can be these, but I think those really accentuate, okay, humans can do a lot of things pretty well, but man, this guy can do these 3 or 4 things really good. What about you?
For me, the human falls into, again, 3 classes very easily. The human fits into the memed and most true thing ever, and that is the fighter. A human fighter is the most picked, most used class race combo, and there's a reason for it. It works very well. You get to play that hero of the world character, and there's nothing wrong with that. And with all the fighter subclasses, you if somebody tells you that your character is unoriginal because you chose a human fighter, they don't know how to play.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because look at human history. There are I'm not even talking about a certain region, a certain country's history. Look at human history. Look at all of the heroes that are talked about. Um, each one of those a human fighter.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's always an original way to play a human fighter. So I love human fighters for that. The other one that I love for humans is definitely the ranger. I think humans playing the ranger, surveying the lands, living off the lands, it's just a great class for them. I think you get to build that connection with your pet if you choose to go Beastmaster a little bit. You understand that a little bit more, I feel. Um, the other one is, and this is kind of weird, but I really like the human sorcerer.
Yeah.
And that's just because I like that activation of ability. I like the fact that from a sorcerer, you're innately born with these gifts. So it just feeds into that human spirit and that human ability to adapt.
Okay.
And so for
I can
me,
see that
human
definitely. I can see
sorcerers
that.
are always great. And I like that fact as well because humans are, I believe, truly the youngest lived race out of every race.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, except for half orcs because we don't know.
yeah, except for half orcs because we don't know. Um, But with that, to think about all of these other races seeing what a human sorcerer can do and understanding that this is a volatile piece of magic coming from a creature that isn't learned in life is just a very interesting concept for me.
Yep. All right. To our last race of the player's handbook, the
But another
tiefling.
personal favorite. How do you feel? I want to know how you feel about these guys first.
How I feel about tieflings?
Yeah.
I have only played one in a one shot, and then I recently made one to play in a in-person game on Sunday nights. And
Okay.
I made an albino tiefling Twilight domain.
Okay. Okay.
So we'll see what happens. I
That's a
do
very
enjoy the
interesting.
versatility of them, and we'll get into that. Let's get through this so I can talk
Yeah,
about the versatility of them and how they look.
definitely.
So for the ability score increases for the tiefling, you get 1 boost to your intelligence, and then your charisma increases by 2. Again, this is falling more into the line of the definitely I don't want to say demonic and lead someone the wrong way, but it is that kind of that devilish charm. That's the best way I can put it. Is that devilish charm, that charm that is just you can't put your finger on it, but it is definitely arcane for this. And no.
Yeah, no, the tieflings, for lack of a better colloquialism, definitely have a forked tongue or a silvered tongue.
Definitely.
Um,
They
they
can
are always well
definitely
spoken.
be the smooth talkers. Kelly, I don't need you booing me. I don't appreciate that from the chat. I need you to calm down.
Oh, if I was feeling better, I would do it in a voice, but I just can't right now, guys. Maybe next time. Maybe next thing we'll do in voices. So, for your tiefling's age, they do mature at the same rate as humans, but live a few years longer. Again, what does this mean?
I don't know, but I feel like I'm getting pressured to do this in a voice.
Don't do it. Don't give in. You
I
give in
might
now,
I
then
might give in.
we have to set a boundary.
Set a
All
boundary.
right. Yes.
Okay.
You can't let the class doesn't teach us, we teach the class.
All right, true. True. I mean I can't be bribed, but we'll see how that
We can't
works.
be bribed,
Can't be
but we'll see.
bribed.
Um so yeah, so your tiefling can live as long as you want because there is no expiration date.
Your size is still considered medium. You are about the same size and build as a human. You definitely they mirror that as far as the physicality when it comes to tieflings. Humans and tieflings are extremely similar in their builds. Your base walking speed is 30. And I'm just watching chat go at it right now, so I need to.
I know.
I need
I'm
to.
watching.
I
got this.
I need to look away.
All right. So along with that, they do get the dark vision thanks to their infernal heritage again. As far as this tiefling is concerned, we're talking only about the the player handbook, PHB. This is a creature of demonic birth or half birth. The tiefling is a half infernal creature, so you do get the dark vision from that. You can see in dim light within the 60 feet as if it were bright, and darkness as if it were dim. Again, you do get hellish resistance. So you do have resistance to fire damage. Again, it wouldn't make sense if your parents are from hell and you can't visit them. Then you do get Infernal Legacy. You know the Thaumaturgy cantrip, which we will go over when we go over spells and builds and classes. When you reach 3rd level, you can cast Hellish Rebuke spell as a 2nd level spell once with this trait and regain the ability to do so when you finish a long rest. So kind of like how the Dragonborn had a breath weapon, because you are a tiefling, you are able to tap into some of that demonic and infernal legacy and use your own casting to be able to do this. Now, when you reach 5th level, you can cast Darkness spell once with this trait and regain the ability to do so with a long rest. And then your charisma is your spell casting ability for these spells. So you gain these spells naturally. Along with this, you can speak, read, and write Common and Infernal. So you do learn the language of Infernal. So Tieflings. Tieflings are a very interesting class. For me, Tieflings range in the way that they sound. Infernal for me, at least from a Tiefling's mouth, has always sounded either Cajun or it sounded very full-worthy, or almost. And I've always played my Tieflings with a Southern drawl. That's just me personally. So that's just how they always are envisioned in me.
For me, I definitely, when it comes to particular characters I've recently introduced in my campaign, I always liked the tieflings to have that bit of like that sultry drawl to them. That's, darling, come forward and bring me some more wine, won't you? I need things done. Definitely the way they draw out certain words in that. They either are probably with like S's, almost like a lisp, but like an elegant one to where it is purposeful almost and drawn out to hold sway and strength over those around them. Especially, to me, tieflings in certain positions of power know they have positions of power and they want to exude that over people around them, especially those they deem lesser than them.
For sure.
Now, my favorite thing about tieflings that I'm beginning to learn is their versatility and how they look. Now, we're going to go a little bit off the pages of the handbook here just to get into this, but you can choose varying differences you can have here with their subraces. Again, we're going off the books a little bit here, but just so I can kind of show you the versatility you can have with all these races. Many of them have these different kind of differences. Not quite as unique as a tiefling, but they have different traits that can come along with them. One of them being, if you choose to be a variant tiefling, you can choose to have wings. You can fly. Your wings are always out, so just be aware of that. And you can choose mostly how they look. For the one tiefling I picked for my Sunday night game, I chose albino. I chose no tail, but instead I chose vampiric fangs, clawed fingernails, and they have no pupil or iris. It is just a solid black eye with like star dots in it. And again, for that was all just, there's no stat changes there. There's no buffs or debuffs to it. It's just saying, hey, this is how my character looks because it's still within the box given to me by this. So we can go again. I just really kind of want to take a minute to dig into altering the appearance of your character to make that character yours and unique to you. And we'll go back to the human. I play a human in another campaign, a different subclass, but that doesn't really matter here. The only thing it says here is that I have to be a certain age, a certain size, and a certain base speed. It doesn't say anything about what's my hair color, what's my eye color, what's my skin tone. All these things can depend upon where you're from and what you've done with your backstory. And we're not going to get too deep into backstory because we do have a lesson for that later on. But essentially, the character I'm playing is from a much more desert region where they're known for having lighter colored hair and red eyes. It was particular to his clan. So he has stark white hair, red eyes, and a bit of a tan.
There you go. That's the best way to explain a character, to be honest. But let's go ahead and finish up with tieflings real quick. What are your last thoughts on them? I know I asked you before what you thought of them, but what are your last thoughts on them?
Last thoughts on them? I really like to see contrasting roles. I love to see a tiefling doing their best to overcome their essentially infernal bloodline and taking that paladin or cleric role of a good aligned deity. And kind of proving it's not where you come from, it's what you choose to do with what you're given.
Can definitely see that. For me, I'm on the other side of the table with that. I like to see tieflings really feed into that. And tieflings are one of the few races that I will say I will always multi-class. Especially if I get to play the one multi-class that I love with tieflings, and that is playing the cleric bard or bard cleric.
Interesting mix-up.
For me, it just, and especially because I love one of the characters that I got to use this for, Thoreau was just a wonderful tiefling who was just based on a southern snake charming, tent having just preacher man where he would just snake oil you and put hands on you and heal you, and he was just very just, when I heal you, you will be healed by my word in my hand and by the fire that I bring upon you. And so having that, it was a fun, great character, and so it really leaned into that, having that high charisma and that forked tongue, and just and I think that's where tieflings really excel, is if you're gonna play a tiefling, either play them play them the dark and brooding sentinel in the corner, or really go all in and push yourself to be that outwardly boisterous character, because there's nothing better than having a blue tiefling who just really wants to get to know you and know all of your secrets while you wait in beds. They're just great characters to play. I absolutely do adore tieflings. And once we get and we're able to incorporate the other books, you'll understand even more why. Because there are some leniencies taken out, and because, as you can see, there are plenty of other tiefling sub races that you get to play from.
Very true.
But those are your player handbook races. So you get, what is that, 12? Or, I'm sorry, that's classes I'm looking at. You get, 3, 6, 9 races to choose from your base player handbook. They cover everything really well. Again, the race class combos that we've given you here are just our personal thoughts, what we kind of like, what is really well fit into the characters, what makes an easy character. And not that easy characters are bad. There is nothing wrong with your character and class meshing. There's nothing wrong with that. Just as there's nothing wrong with your character and class clashing. Excuse me. Play the class, play the race that you really want to. That's what's going to make it fun. But You have any final thoughts on the races of the book?
Um, no, not really. They're pretty well put out. They were, for their time, fantastic and a good direction forward with 5th edition D&D. I enjoy how all of it lines up. I enjoy playing any one of these. You could, the more you get along with this game, the more you play it, the more you're going to be like, man, what do I want to play this time? Well, I haven't tried this yet. Maybe I'll try this. And some things, maybe you just don't like certain races. Like, I wouldn't say I don't like halflings. I would just say I haven't found myself in a mindset to want to make one yet. I look forward to being there and seeing what kind of character it becomes, but for the most part, I've played probably 3/4 of the races available here, whether it be through a campaign or through maybe even just a quick one-shot. They're all fun to play, and it really just comes down to learning what all of these are, learning what they're known for, and then asking yourself, okay, if I'm going to play a character, what's going to be most in line with my play style?
Or what's going to be most out of line with my playstyle? If you're really trying to force yourself out of normal your normal mindset, play a race that really embodies something that isn't what you would normally choose to do, and see how that works for you. You know, I've seen some really calm and quiet people really come out of their shells playing a dwarf or a halfling or a gnome where they're just loud and boisterous.
Yeah.
And I've seen some loudmouths get calm and quiet and thoughtful when they're playing an elf.
I've seen a lot of things happen. Yeah, it's hard to add on to that just because I've seen it too. It's great that once you really get into this game, yeah, you can still be you. You know, you'll never not be you, but you can really begin to ask yourself, okay, if I'm playing this character, how would they act in this moment? How would they be here? Because you know what you would do in a certain moment. You know what you would do any time of the day. But what would your character do? How would they react? How would they feel? You're a gnome and or let's take a much easier one here. If you're a half orc and you're walking through a field of combat and you just watch this guy get his head cleaved off, you're probably just going to keep walking. Go get some food. It's not going to really bother you too much. But if you're that, skittish halfling wizard who was brought out here to be arcane backup, and you see some dude get his head lobbed off, you're probably going to throw up.
Yeah. Well, not the halfling, because the halfling has brave. But the gnome would.
The gnome would.
The
there
gnome
you
would. Hey, look, you never know. That half orc might take the skull and use it as their next drinking mug. But with you saying that, definitely playing outside of what you would normally think and how you would normally think, you may understand that you may think that way too. You may unlock a new part of yourself and a new understanding of yourself, and that's what's great about this and this game. So now I can't agree with any more than what we've already said. So,
all right.
How would you like to wrap up today's class, sir?
Well, let's wrap up today's class with I would say a quiz, but that's too cruel.
You know what? How about a general question?
Sure. What do you got?
The question for me, regarding the races that we've gone over, what would be the race that you would most align with and most be unaligned with? What would be the race that you would say you would most embody? And then which one would you say is the furthest from you? And then why?
I would say most like me will probably be the half orc. just because I've always been like a bigger guy. I won't say, I don't want to get too much into this answer, but I'll say that just because of my background, in particular branches I chose to align myself with. Definitely a pretty good fighter. It's a pretty good warrior. And then also, I'm just a big guy that people would think is intimidating. I'm really not, but sometimes sometimes I lean in on it. Sometimes I would like to not look so mean looking. I definitely have resting douchebag face. I know this. I definitely have what I call a very punchable face. I know this.
There you go.
And then
so what
furthest from me, probably dwarf, because I am not that hardy. I'm not very, I don't know how to put this, not very physically resilient. Pretty mentally tough, but physically I can get knocked down pretty easy.
Well, that's just because we're getting old.
Yeah, true. Actually, you know what?
Right.
I'll change my answer. You got a solid point there. I'll say probably the gnome. I wouldn't say I'm too very cunning. I definitely answer a lot of my questions with just hit it harder.
Hey, look, there's nothing wrong with subscribing to the Jeremy Clarkson School of Problems. If the hammer you're using doesn't work, just get a bigger hammer.
So there's my two. I said the most aligned with me would be the half orc, based upon the traits we've seen of those, and the most furthest from me would be the gnome, because I don't think through my problems most of the time. I just get a bigger hammer.
This is a hard one for me. So I know which one I'm least like.
We'll start there.
I am least like the elf. I'm not very dexterous. I just don't like have that long-term like mindset and worldview. I'm not worried about that. But for me, for the most closely, I'm always stuck between the tiefling and the human. And that's because I do consider myself traveled. I've traveled at least as much as I could. I've traveled this entire country, and I've stopped in different places and met different people. And if anybody who knows me understands that you leave me in a room for 5 minutes with 10 people, I'm gonna make 8 friends. So that's where my tiefling, just that natural charisma. I want to be out there. I want to be in front of people. I want to be giving them my all, and I love it. And then the human, because again, I do have that traveled, and I do enjoy fulfilling that roles and surviving and trying to see what else I can learn, how else I can adapt, what new skills I can bring into my repertoire. And I feel like that's what a human for D&D is they're the Swiss Army tool, is they just find a new tool to use. And so that's where I'm stuck between those two. But that's my answer, is the human and the tiefling.
Okay. Good answers.
I am a very basic human, so
it's all right.
But that's all I have. Is that all you have, good sir?
That's all I've got. Just some quick end of stream announcements. Don't forget, tomorrow night, right here at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, you can catch our Bar 20 show, where we currently have our ongoing campaign of the wild cards. We will be short one member tomorrow. One of them could not make it, but we will have fun and laughs. Ricky will be missed tomorrow night, but maybe you can tune in wherever you're going to be at. We do have plans and a project in place to begin a Saturday stream. Not yet, probably a few more weeks, and we will announce what it will be and what it will be about as we get closer to that date. I know we have your plans in place for the reoccurring Friday night stream. Have you chosen a date for that?
Yep, the first episode of The Temptation of Reldon will begin on the 21st of this month.
Okay, so start on the 21st, and then every Friday beyond that, you can catch Mr. Knighted Bishop in the DM chair here on the Player Hater Gaming channel. He will be a DM to where I get to sit at a table and have a lot of fun along with some other fantastic people. You'll see some familiar faces from the Wednesday night stream and some new faces from our last Friday night stream. As we have made our announcements, we're taking a bit of a break from the Dressado campaign. One of our players is going through some things, couldn't be through here, but we didn't want him to miss out because we love him very much, and we didn't want to continue on with this great story without that integral part to the story. So Bishop was like, you know what? We're just going to take it. We're going to go to the other side of the planet and have fun there.
Yeah, we're just gonna go a couple 100,000 miles away, and
we're gonna go
have fun there.
Eat the campaign that way.
But I will say, while we do miss him, we hope him a quick and speedy recovery.
Absolutely.
I was graced with another player who you said is again from our wild cards table, so I'm excited to have them at our table, and I can't wait, man. It's gonna be fun.
It's gonna be a blast. I can't wait. And what time were you gonna kick those off on Friday nights?
Those are going to be kicking off at 7:30 Eastern Standard, so 6:30 your time.
Okay. So really in line with our Wednesday night show.
Yep.
Nice. All right, everybody. Well, we say it a lot. We're gonna say it again. If you haven't done it yet, please come join the Discord. We would love to see you there. We would love to talk about tabletop games, life, share memes, or just laugh with each other. Sometimes at each other. We'll see how it goes. But we'll be dropping all those social links in the chat here in just a moment for our end screen. Thank you for being here for the second episode of the UniversiD&D. We hope you learned something. And at the end of all this, we hope you're able to have the confidence to sit down at a brand new table and play this fantastic game with people. Until then, we will see you here Tuesday nights. I know I'll catch you Wednesday. Soon Fridays. You're gonna have a lot of PhD in your life, so
Saturdays and Sundays.
Sundays. We got a lot lined up because we have a lot of things we want to deliver to our community who has supported us immensely up to this point, and want to make sure we're giving back as much quality content as we can. So thank you for all your support, and we will catch you next time.
Yep. Thank you, and I guess I'll say it for Professor Brandon and guest lecturer Bishop. Have a good evening and class dismissed.